Welcome to a podcast about all things casting for actors or those who want to be an actor, and maybe for those who work in the industry and are smart enough to learn all parts of the biz. This is The Casting Curtain. Hi, my name is Sally Forcier, and I'm a casting director, producer, and acting coach, and have been in the biz for over 25 years. Now let's get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you, and welcome to the Casting Curtain podcast. Today, I am so thrilled to have a very special guest on our show. This is a veteran actor who has so much to share with you as up-and-coming actors, working actors, anybody who wants to learn something and grow and maybe find some encouragement. Today's guest is known for some very cool roles. You might have seen him on Pale Rider, Twilight Zone the Movie, and of course, Back to the Future 2 and 3. We have a very special guest of a veteran actor, Jeffrey Weissman, who's been acting professionally, actually acting in total over 51 years, celebrating 51 years in the industry, guys. And going professional in 1977. So, this guy has a lot to offer us today on this show. So I want to thank you so much, Jeffrey. Welcome to the show. And thank you for being on our podcast, The Casting Curtain, today. How are you doing, my friends?
Hi, Sally. I'm busy.
Oh, he's working. Okay. Do you want me to stall?
Well, I'm hopefully bringing up photos that we can use later on in our interview.
Awesome.
I'll set that aside and I'll turn my video on. Where am I?
Very cool.
Hi.
Hey.
Good to be here.
Good to have you. Thank you. I really appreciate you joining us. I've watched you over the years. You have so many great posts on social media.
I thought someone was watching me.
That was me. And of course, I'm a huge fan of Back to the Future, all of them, but 2 and 3, it was so fun to watch you bring that character to life and have fun with it. I can't wait to dive in deep. I know you have a ton of casting stories that you can share with us, but why don't you first start with opening up a little bit of how you got started in the business?
Yeah, well, I as far as I can remember, always wanted to be an actor, and pretty much my parents would not allow me to try my hand at being a professional actor until I got through my schooling. But I acted in school, community theater, even did shows at UCLA and various other institutions that I knew directors who needed young talent for, trying to just hone the talent. I had kind of the handcuffs broken when I turned 18. My parents couldn't tell me what to do anymore, so I signed up to do pretty much background work. Just wanted to get my foot in the door and see what it was like being on big movie studio sets. And
which is a great way for any actors watching today. If
yeah, and the experience of seeing how it's a team effort and the excitement of boring production. For an extra, it's really not all that. For an actor, being an extra is not that fulfilling in that I sat around playing backgammon most of the time, or
right.
Chewing the fat with the other extras, what have you. But it was really great to rub shoulders with the stars and watch the tech and the director and so on and so forth. And I remember I had a callback for a new play by Neil Simon called Brighton Beach Memoirs. And the casting director down at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion said, "You've got talent, but no one's going to take you seriously unless you get some real training." Mm-hmm. And, even though I had plenty of credits on the resume, I didn't have on the resume really solid training. I was in acting workshops, but nothing that really stood out. So I set my sights on the West Coast, since I was on the West Coast, to go to the American Conservatory Theater. I eventually got in the Summer Training Congress in about 81 and continued towards the master's program. While doing my intermediate studies, fell into an opportunity to screen test for the lead in a major motion picture.
Amazing, amazing. And what was that picture?
It was called The Genius, and Martin Brest, who directed Beverly Hills Cop and Son of a Woman, many wonderful films. He was a hot item, new out in Hollywood from New York, and he was obsessed with this project, The Genius. At one time, John Lennon was attached, Warren Oates was attached when I came on, and then he died, and United Artists and MGM had merged, and they couldn't decide whether or not they wanted to do the film. When Warren Oates died, the film went into turnaround, losing its backing. Even though I threw an open call, this is a very interesting casting thing that sometimes happens. You hear about this. Martin was so obsessed with finding the perfect young actor for his lead, he had open calls in 5 major cities: New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Seattle, San Francisco. And down at Fort Mason in San Francisco, I went in with a friend of mine who I thought was right for this. At San Francisco State, where I was doing intermediate studies, a notice was posted looking for a non-actor for a lead in a Hollywood film. I was like,
Wow.
I had a friend who I thought was perfect for that. They wanted someone who was 18, and I was already 20. So my friend at the last minute said he didn't want to go unless I went with him. And so there I was at a cattle call. And
And for those, let's stop there for a second.
yes,
I
yeah,
don't think those happen very much anymore.
not so much. Every once in a while, you'll see mostly America's Got Talent, that type of
Yeah.
show doing them.
Let's talk. What's the definition of a cattle call? Cattle call, for those watching, I mean, I have only done maybe 2 or 3 in my 24 years of experience as a casting director, because it's crazy. People show up with no experience, we take their picture, and hopefully something sticks. I have to say, a cattle call is how I got into the business.
Uh,
So if it does work, and now I created a career out of it, but it is also one of those things you got to be careful of, right? Like, there are things out there you got to make sure, look through the cracks here, and listen to your gut if something doesn't feel right. And what I'm saying, I'll just be direct. If they're trying to charge you $2,000 or $3,000 to sign up after this cattle call, then that's a big red flag. Walk away, right?
yes, yes. There's so many, I want to say, not vampires, but vultures, people who take
Sure.
advantage of wannabes,
And their
people who don't
dream.
have experience.
Yes. And so I just want to say, I'm glad you brought that up, because we haven't talked about that yet on this podcast, but cattle calls were really a bigger thing back in those days, 80s, 90s, even in the 2000s, but it really is not as common. So just be careful, but also know it can change the trajectory of your career. So going back to your story, my friend, you were there with your buddy.
Yes, and there were about 500 guys. And the casting director at that time was Wally Nacita, um, and Martin Brest and his assistants were going through the actors 6 at a time. You filled out your application. Really great talent were there that I later learned in the Bay Area, from all over, from the improv world, from film, local film and television. And they were all hungry and wanting to get a crack at this. And I had, at the time, I was juggling 6 different scripts. I was really honing my craft. I had on my application written down, I'm working on my naturalism and my realism. And I think that caught their attention. They had me read with their actress. They had my friend read with their actress. They excused my friend. After I read, they said, whoa, come over here. And they took me aside while still going through all the other actors 6 at a time. And they had me read a second scene for the director. And the director said, okay, thank you. That's good enough. We've seen enough. Why don't we'll be in touch if we want to see more. And that was with Marty Brest. I don't know if you can see my
Yes.
share screen there. And so I
Great
was
picture.
I was about at the back to my car when the actress that I had read with came running up and saying, Jeffrey, the director wants to see you again.
Wow.
I was like, okay. And I came back, and Marty took me aside and said, look, I liked what you did in the first reading, the second reading, not so much. I said, look, I didn't expect to be here. I
And
only
they
came.
were looking for non-actors.
They were non-actors. I was actually hungover. I was at my a girlfriend at the time's graduation party the night before in Santa Cruz, and I used my friend's razor, which didn't work very well on my thick beard. Anyway, he said, "Okay, let's read the first scene again." I did, and he said, "Great." And he turned to his casting and said, "I want him to screen test." And so for the next really kind of 6 months, I was sort of held on the line for the screen test. All those things that I talked about, more notes dying, the film going into turnaround because the execs not figuring out if they even want to do this film. And I got pursued by an agent. An agent had just opened a boutique agency out. She had come out from William Morris in New York, opened her agency in Beverly Hills, and Martin Brest, the director, had told her I was his favorite for the lead in this film.
Wow.
And she was coming up to the Bay Area to visit her friend who was producing Phil Kaufman's The Right Stuff, and wanted to drop in on me, and brought me a beautiful bottle of wine when I met her. And she said, "You have to have an agent negotiate your contract before you screen test. Otherwise, you have the studio over a barrel." They learn the hard way. They don't want to have actors in control of the situation. So I agreed to having this agent represent me. And I checked her business to make sure she was legit. I had a professor who was working on television, Rhoda Gimignani, whose brother produced Who's the Boss, and she called her agent. They offered to negotiate for me. So I was trying to, work all the business things, make sure everything was on the up and up. And
Well done, by the way. A lot of people don't realize that's absolutely what you should do. So thank you for sharing that.
so after the film went into turnaround and got regrouped and back on track with the screen tests, I finally went to LA, and the name of the film, The Genius, had been changed to War Games. So the day I tested, they also tested 5 other actors who came in through agents. I was the only one to come in through the through the open calls, which I thought, really inflated my ego when I was told that.
Out of
But
500 guys.
we were all testing with Ali Sheedy. It was Brian Backer, who had just won a Tony Award on Broadway for playing young Woody Allen in The Floating Light Bulb. Albert Macklin, John Stockwell from Christine, Dana Carvey, who was
Wow.
still working on One of the Boys with Mickey Rooney and Scatman Crothers, and Eric Stoltz.
Nice.
And I remember just kind of letting a few things trip me up. I was planned to get up early in the hotel they put me up and to swim, because I'm gonna warm up doing swim, and there was no water in the pool. Anyway, I had a few things trip me up. Ali Sheedy, during my test, kept looking through or around me, and I was like, "Why is she not connecting with me? What's going on here?" And I noticed she was looking at Eric Stoltz, who was in the soundstage, kind of in the corner watching. And I was like, Many years later, I ran into Eric and I asked him, I said, "Were you and Ali an item when we were testing for War Games?" He said, "What year was that?" And I said, "82." And he goes, "Yeah, we were living together."
Ah,
Aha. Anyway, none of us got the role. As we know,
ah.
Matthew Broderick ended up doing the film. And only a few years ago, I finally brought myself to watching that movie. And Matthew did a great job.
That was probably because it was pretty painful, huh? Because you're like,
It was very painful to lose it, because having an agent tell you that you're the director's favorite, and so on and so forth. And then my agent got very bitter when I didn't get the part. She said, they were never going to give a multi-million-dollar film to a complete unknown. What was I thinking? And I was like, "Oh dear God."
unbelievable.
But
Well,
nonetheless,
can we talk about that for a second? Because
sure.
she got in your head, she built up this story of how much you were the main choice so far. Did that affect your auditioning, screen testing at all? Because I feel like sometimes that could really hurt an actor
Yes,
versus
I really had some harsh ego training. And
sure.
it was very important for me to both take advantage of being a hot item at the time. And in fact, because of the screen test of War Games at MGM, I had many doors open to me. And something that has gone also by the wayside that was very prevalent back in the early 80s and probably through the 90s were general auditions, general meetings, where I'd go to the head of casting at all the different studios and just read for them whatever they happened to be casting at the time. And a get to know me type thing. And that rarely happens these days.
Yep.
Unless you are a very probably high powered agent, you probably get your clients in like that. But you don't see that much, or I don't hear about it very much. I had also just really lovely meetings all over Hollywood. And about a year later, a friend of mine called and said, "Hey, there's this open call for this medieval story shooting over at Warner Brothers. And you want to go with me?" And I was like, "I can't go on open calls. Nah, I got an agent now." But says, "Oh, come on, you'd probably be right for this." And I said, and my friend Carl, who that I'm referring to, became actually a very big agent for below the line talent. But setting that aside, I went with him to, once again, one of these 500 guy cattle calls, waited in line for 3 hours. And Lauren Lloyd, the casting director, she recognized me. She said, "Oh, I know you. You were up for, what was the role? Jaime? I forget the character name in Honky Tonk Man, a Clint Eastwood film." And she goes, yeah, Clint liked you, but didn't want to. The character gets hit in the face with a shotgun, and he didn't want to do that to you. Thought your face was too angelic." I don't care. Let Clint hit me in the face. Yes. Anyway, she said, "Don't worry, you're big in our books and our files.
That's not.
You're not right for this." I said, "Great." The next day, my agent called me and said, "What are you doing going on an open call, casting call?" I was like, "Don't you think if I thought you were right for this, I'd submit you?" And I was like, I had a very hard-nosed agent, but it proved actually very wonderful for my career. And I said, "I'm sorry. I apologize." She in turn said, do you have in the back of your mind what happened on War Games?" I said, "Yeah, it was kind of in the back of my mind." She goes, "Good, because they've decided to read you for this role." And I got Richard Donner is the director, and he's out of the country scouting locations in Italy. But I got you the only copy of the script that's available. It's being messengered to your place now. I was like, "What?" And your audition for the vice president of casting at Warner Brothers features, was it Marion Doherty? Tomorrow.
Great memory.
Okay. So I got the script. I went in, and she was very happy to meet me. Asked me what I liked in the script. I said, I found 19 scenes that I love. I had started doing Renaissance fairs in 73, 74, and just loved doing medieval Renaissance fantasy role play and so on and so forth, and Shakespeare I adore, Marlowe, etc. And she said, "Great, let's do all of the scenes that you like." I was like, okay, may I use props? May I use your office? I wanted to be polite. She said, "Use anything you want." So I went to town and did all these scenes. I was very, very lucky.
Wow.
She said, "I'm going to speak with the director tonight, who's on Italy time, and tell him about you, and we'll take it from there." I said, "Thank you very much." And then I remember I left with my family on a short vacation for the weekend to Mexico. And when I got back, my phone was ringing, and it was my agent. "Where have you been? I've been trying to get a hold of you for days." I said, "I told you I was going to Mexico." She goes, "They have an actor for this film who's asking too much money, and they're going to test you on the West Coast, another actor on the East Coast, and your test is tomorrow." I was like, "Oh, okay." And so I was going to Warner Brothers early for my test, locking the door of my bungalow in Hollywood, and my phone was ringing. I was like, I went back in to answer it, and was my agent saying, "Oh, the test is off. Matthew Broderick just came down in his price."
Was Matthew again?
Yes, it was Lady Hawk. I was going to be testing with Michelle Pfeiffer, and
Unbelievable.
so on and so forth. Anyway, so I still haven't watched Lady Hawk.
I bet you haven't.
Anyway, so after, I moved back to LA, I'd fallen in love with the San Francisco Bay Area. I mean, the city was the first time I felt and saw other people being their freaky selves. And, I mean, the crazy level and people being comfortable with however they feel
Yeah.
like they need to be was allowable. And I never got that growing up in Los Angeles.
Right.
So I fell in love with San Francisco. And when the agent said, you have to move back to LA so I can rep you, I was like, wait a minute, I'm still in my master's program training. I love it here. And she goes, if you want me to rep you. And I said, okay. So I moved back to LA and took all these meetings after the screen test as a hot item. And finally, about 3 months after being back down there, I had an audition for Marcy Liroff and Mike Fenton, Jane Feinberg, for George Miller, whose work I love, the Mad Max movies and Road Warrior. And he was in Hollywood to direct his very first project, which was one of Spielberg's 4 directors on Twilight Zone the movie, which had the terrible accident with Vic Morrow on the John Landis set in the last day of shooting 3 months before. And so it was a shock to me that they were going to finish this film, but Spielberg decided to do it anyway. And I just got along beautifully with George Miller. He was just a delightful human being. And my audition was to tell a joke. I made them laugh. I got along with George and found myself on set co-starring in this beautiful, wonderful ensemble cast with John Lithgow. And it just was a thrill to be a part of that set.
Yeah. Oh,
It was one of the first times I love being involved and watching the crew do their thing. And I can't help but check the new technology. And George Miller and Alan Davio, the cinematographer, were beside themselves because it was one of the first times they were able to tap the lens to a video playback and see on the monitor what they were shooting. It was
wow.
one of the first times for that. It was one of the first times that Garrett Brown was there using his Steadicam. Garrett's a 6'3" guy, and the Steadicam was over 65 pounds, and he's running up and down the aisles of the fuselage of the airplane, and I got sick. I got cat scratch fever while we were shooting. In the middle of the night, one of my cat's kittens was clawing on my arm. I was, get off! I got to go to work tomorrow. And the next day, I developed blood poisoning.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, I was kind of ill for part of the shoot, which kind of made the excitement and thrill of this creature on the wing of the airplane tearing us up in this horrible. It
Right.
helped my character and helped
I was
my.
just gonna say, so you're using a situation for the good of your character.
I believe strongly, since I teach actors, I believe strongly in using your real energy. If you're going for energy that's not real, you're probably shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah.
And staying in the moment, there's so many different elements that you need to bring to your audition, to bring to your performance, and connecting, listening on so many levels. Yeah, and I've studied with actors like Kirk Baltz who believe in dream work and so on and so forth. Connecting on so many ways. Michael Chekhov's teachings of you find the psychological gesture, not only physical but the psychological and the trauma that your character has, and using your own traumas to help feed wherever you need to go. Anyways, it's really fun. I made the mistakes early on auditions of always trying to please everyone else.
Yep.
Rather than please me and just do the hard work. As Bryan Cranston in his advice to actors says, get in, show you can do the work, be brilliant, and get out.
Right.
And forget about it.
Yeah. I love the pivoting conversation because there's nothing more maddening in the casting process, or, I produce as well. Just wrapped my 9th movie in 7 years.
I see.
Thank you. All my posters.
Am I going the right way?
You can point anywhere. I have posters all over me. I'm so proud of the projects we've been a part of, but production, so from casting to production, it's maddening for me when I see actors break their character and start over without just adapting and adjusting in the moment, because so much brilliance can come in those moments that you're now showing your human side. And it goes to me as far as back to that ego that we all have of trying to look good and be right and say the right thing and do the right thing. And oops, I messed up. Let me do it again. And everybody has to reset, the crew, the cast. It's maddening to me. So I love that you shared that, and that you still were in character and you used it for your scene. And by the way, that scene in Twilight Zone was, I mean, my most memorable scene of John Lithgow seeing that creature on the wing. I still think about it, was talking about it the other day. So
And I'm still good friends with Larry Cedar, who played the creature.
oh,
He's
awesome.
a fabulous actor. To just back up a moment and reinforce what you're saying, there are a couple things that I put my foot down with talent that I'm working with. You don't cut until the director says cut. You keep the life going, even if the script, the lines have stopped. Keep it going. Keep your connection. And on working on Pale Rider, I learned from Clint Eastwood, who I believe learned from Don Schwartz, who directed him in the Dirty Harry movies, who learned from John Ford, is shoot the rehearsals. Because as soon as an actor hears action, usually they get self-conscious and the shoulders go up and so on and so forth.
Yep.
Whereas in the rehearsal, they know that they can try things out and they're much more relaxed. On Pale Rider, Clint loves to just be ahead of schedule. He was fighting the weather, he was fighting budgetary stuff, all sorts of different elements, and he had a lot of shots to get. And often, example, if you know Pale Rider, I play Teddy Conway, one of two boys of Spider Conway that Doug McGrath stepped in to play. I think Rip Torn was originally cast. And it took us to shoot Spider's death scene. It took us 3 days to shoot that. And we were fighting the weather, even though it was still October. We had blizzards and such out of Sun Valley, Ketchum, Idaho. And if you look at the quick edits of that scene, you see Doug as Spider in sunlight, then Brother and I over at the Mercantile in a blizzard. And then when we get to his dead body, all the snow had melted, so they brought in the oil-based fake snow. And when Richard Hamilton as Blankenship, the merchant, comes to collect the boys, the snow is being picked up by the wind and blown in chunks. It's hilarious. But when we got to the scene where the boys get to Daddy's dead body in front of the bad marshals and fabulous John Russell as Marshal Stockburn and his deputies, rather, I remember we were rehearsing, and Chuck LaFont, who was playing Eddie Conway, my brother, went to my spot that we had choreographed and set. Right. And so I switched the last second to Chuck's spot, slipped on the oil-based snow, almost kicked poor Daddy Doug in the head. I remember seeing his hair move on the top of his head from my boot, and still stayed in character, stayed crying, even though this was a rehearsal. Yeah. And I knew he was shooting it. And when I heard at the end of the shot, Clint say, "Cut, all right, let's move on." And I got right into Clint's face right then. I said, "Clint, Chuck didn't hit his spot. I almost kicked Doug in the head." And he thought about it and he said, no, we're just going to cut from your face.
Oh my gosh.
Which meant I had the close up.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That's incredible.
So we never really did a take of that shot. So
but that goes to say, staying in character is huge, and you probably made such a great impression on everybody, including Clint. I mean, wow, that is, to me, that's a total pro, and what a great example.
And what you also see, even by these professional eccentric actors, Sean Penn and with various other stars, will stay in character all through the shoot, even when they're not shooting. And I have theories of why they do that. For years, I was like, why are they doing that? Well, it may be because the character is so far away from themselves. This is the way they stay grounded. Others, it probably is easier for them. I have for many years performed in environmental theater, where I'll stay in character for 8 hours at a Renaissance fair, or the Charles Dickens Christmas Fair, 10 hours, or the immersive hit show in San Francisco, The Speakeasy. I was a comedic vaudevillian in that, and that was a 1,500-page script. um, so, and for those, I'm used to staying in character. I've worked in theme parks in between television and movie work, where I'm in character in the public, and it's 360-degree theater in the round, immersive. And that's coming a lot now with virtual shoots. And it's challenging, but it's also I think necessary, especially since the mediums are you have both live and studio stuff, and now virtual production,
Yeah.
which I think is going to come more and more, especially for games.
Can I ask you about the casting for Pale Rider?
Yes, that's that aggressive agent of mine that I had. God bless Paula Cedar. She had been. I had casting directors. I remember when I went into audition for Michael Chenich, the head of comedy casting at Universal, cast me in Crackers for Louis Malle. And he said, you should thank that agent of yours. She's called me, 10 times for this little one-page part?
That's awesome. That's a great thing for an actor to hear. Right on. They're earning their paycheck.
My agent's pissing everyone off. Your agent's awfully aggressive. So this is how her aggressiveness paid off. I don't know that it's always so good, but she had called over at Warner Brothers and said, well, I'm just doing my weekly check-in. You have anything that's casting that didn't come out in breakdowns? And for those who don't know, breakdowns is where an agent finds out what the studios and casting directors are looking for various projects. And the casting director said, yes, we have a part in this Clint Eastwood Western that we're just going to cast from our own files. We have the talent, we think. She said, well, why don't you tell me what it is? Maybe I have a client. And they described a role that she thought I could play. So she pitched me, and I went in and auditioned. Now, Clint was already on location, so I was put on tape by the producer, Fritz Mantz, for Malpaso. What had happened was Sean Penn's late brother, Chris, had met Clint at a party and said, I want to do a Western with you. And Clint said, well, I'm going back to Westerns after 10 years, whatever. I'm finally going to do this one that I've had for a while. And he sent Chris the script of Pale Rider and offered him the part of Teddy Conway. Chris threw it back at Clint and says, I don't want to play a good guy, I want to play bad guy. So Chris got moved into LaHood Jr.'s role, the Richard Dicehart's son, the bad guy who attempts the rape of Sidney Penny's character. And Chuck LaFont, who was originally Teddy, was moved into Eddie, and they were looking for a Teddy. And that was the role. And I knew I didn't want to blow my opportunity to cry on cue, which I had to do in my scene, which was over Daddy's dead body, or bringing Daddy's dead body back to the camp and telling the preacher, Clint's character, that the bad guys wanted to see him now. Bang, bang. So I had studied many different types of acting, subjective personalization, some method with sense memory and emotional recall, and just Zen approach, Meisner, put all your attention away from yourself, do fantasy charging. I had all these different techniques that I was drawing from just for my audition.
Wow.
I didn't want to leave anything to chance.
Good for you.
And I just happened to have a lock of my grandmother's hair in a test tube. She was really the only one in my family who said, darling, if you want to be an actor, do it. Don't let anyone deter you. She was British, and I just adored her. And here's $20, go buy yourself an ice cream. And so I had my grandmother's lock of hair in my pocket. I did my homework for doing a fantasy charging of as if my father had actually died, and I was crying over his dead body. And I eventually just used the script because it was in the script. It was well written, and it was right there. And if I was in the moment and believing it, it worked. And the tears came effortlessly.
Beautiful.
and it was put on tape. And so that was on Friday, and on Monday I was on an airplane heading to Idaho to
Wow,
shoot.
that's fast. That is fast. And did Clint give you any different direction once you met him? Was there any
No,
nothing? Did you have
no,
rehearsal?
that and that's the beauty of, I've worked with such brilliant directors, from George Miller to Robert Zemeckis to Louis Malle. The directors mostly cast capable actors who don't need directing. Maybe once in a while some problem solving, or you're giving us too much, pull back or give us more. But generally, um, I didn't get any character development stuff. As Teddy, I saw in the script he's kind of a half wit. Oh no, I played him as a quarter wit. If you see the first scene, I'm fishing in water that deep with a hook and no bait. And I'm repeating lines that my brother just said to Michael Moriarty as Hulbert. Ain't that kind of done? Going to town. And I had this thing where the character, when anything exciting happened, I'd immediately have my feet come out from under me and fall on my butt. And Clint liked it. I even came and checked with him. I said, "Is it okay doing this comedy bit, falling on my?" He liked it. He said, "That's all wonderful," but he didn't use any of it.
Yeah. Oh, well, I do have to say,
And
I
then,
take an opportunity to tell you that my dad was a huge fan of Pale Rider. He
oh,
loved
nice.
he loved his westerns. He just passed this year, so it's really
Oh, I'm
special
sorry.
to talk to you about that. But I think I do want to
I would
move.
have sent him a signed picture. I'm sorry.
Oh, he's right here watching you and smiling, I'm sure, from ear to ear. So I'm
Yay.
sure everybody's dying to hear more about, which is Back to the Future 2 and 3. How
Sure.
exciting was that for you? You've given me a little sneak peek of what you're going to tell us, but I'd like you to set us up with how that casting came about. Because now this is several years later, right? And what was that process like for you? And did the excitement of a first movie, a huge success, get in the way at all of your confidence of auditioning and showing up?
I'm just putting on the screen here what
Yeah,
I look like. I don't look like myself
not
in
at all.
part two or part three, but I played George at those three different ages there. And
Oh,
um, I had worked on not only those various films from Twilight Zone through Crackers and Johnny Dangerously to television shows like Max Headroom in Dallas and Scarecrow and Mrs. King and such, those mid 80s. Um, so I'm playing Groucho Marx, all these characters at Universal, and I get a call in my dressing room from this agent who got me that job and says, "Do you know who Crispin Glover is?" I go, "Sure. I did a film with him in '83 at the American Film Institute with Dan O'Hurley. Fascinating actor. I got his phone number, tried to stay in touch. And in '85, when Back to the Future came out, it was the main competition for Pale Rider. So when I went to go see it, and I was like, "Oh, Michael J. Fox is incredible in this. Christopher Lloyd's incredible. Leah Thompson, wonderful." And then I saw Crispin as George, and I was like, "He's killing it." I even called him up. I said, "Congratulations, fantastic." He didn't call me back right away. So I said to the agent, "Yeah, I know who Crispin is." He said, "Are you the same height and weight?" I said, "No, he's taller than me and probably heavier." He goes, "Oh, well, do you think you're close?" And I said, "What is this for? The Back to the Future sequels that they're rumoring?" And he says, "I'm not at liberty to say." It's like, get me in there.
Yeah,
My ex-wife was having our second child. I needed my medical coverage. I'd be happy to be. They were looking for a photo double or stand-in,
yep.
and I needed to get my SAG medical. And so I went in and met with the assistant directors. I said, I've worked on Pale Rider. I've all these big sets. I know my way around a set. And they said, "Great." And they spoke with Robert Zemeckis about me. And then I started getting sent for makeup fittings, prosthetic makeup fittings. And then I went to casting and read the scene where Marty and George are hanging the laundry in the backyard from the first film.
And was
And
that
haven't-
the first time you were suspect of why am I reading for this? Did
yeah,
they
I didn't really get the idea that I was to play the role, to be the main one playing the role. I figured that they needed George in multiple places at the same time in the same scenes. I wasn't really being told. I wasn't being told much, except
hush
that
hush?
I
Yeah,
figured they needed two Georges.
gotcha.
And then I screen tested in the young George makeup, the 17-year-old George when he's back in Hill Valley of 1955. And at that screen test, Robert Zemeckis, Bob Z asked Dean Cundy, the cinematographer, "What do you think, Dean?" And he said, "I think we have Crispin without the trouble." And I was like, "Well, what does that mean?" And then my makeup artist, Ken Chase, he said, "Crispin's out, you're going to be George." I was like,
That's how you heard?
that's how I heard. I said, how is that possible? And I called Crispin right away. I said, I was hoping you'd say a good word for me to be your photo double stand-in, but I didn't. What happened? Are you on another project that you can't get out of the schedule? Because I couldn't fathom how they could do this project without him. He was so good in the first film.
Mm.
And I hadn't seen the script for part 2 and 3, which was originally one script called Paradox, but it was too long. I should show you I'm not at my home office, but the script is about that thick. It's like hundreds and hundreds of pages with all the rewrites and everything. And recently, looking back at, say, the McFly home of 2015, they didn't know what they had. There's one version where Marty is in the ortholive hanging upside down, and there's urban legends that they put George upside down to obscure that it was a different actor. Well, no, it was always planned to have Crispin upside down in that ortholive, because I had heard on the first film he would overshoot his marks for camera. He would not hit his mark here, or he'd be off frame here, and so on and so forth. So the Bob Z and Bob Gale decided, well, if we have him hanging upside down on this rail, we can control his marks.
And for those who aren't aware, back then, if you don't hit your mark, it was shot on film. So
yeah, it was very expensive.
Huge problem for focus. It's not like digitally we can fix that, but oh my gosh, that's incredible.
So it was a case, I later found out, that Crispin and or his agent were holding out for $1 million. And his star was on the rise. He did a knockout job in River's Edge. He was in the Doors movie. He had a lot of pretty high profile work. But apparently from Bob Gale, I heard many stories, and from others, how he was a big problem on the first shoot, of disappearing during the shoot, of causing trouble, bringing in a painting that he and Leah in character had made together and insisting that it be part of the set, and Bob Zemeckis not agreeing with him, and him blowing his top when the Kenny Chase cut his hair when he fell asleep in his chair. Being kind of eccentric and not so professional. I personally am a big fan of his work, and it's very hard for me because I'm looked at as the scab, or the what do you call it, anyway, the one who's not the real George, and I've taken a lot of public abuse, and it's hard for me because I agree with some of the things that they say, but there was no way they were going to be able to make the films kind of seamlessly without him. So they used some footage from the first film, close-ups of him mixed with my work as young George, and then as old George, I'm hanging upside down. I got to do all that under, it was 4 hours a day in any of those makeups. And in part 3, just that brief scene towards the end, as 47-year-old George. And then, sure enough, after part 3 came out, Crispin called me because he was ready to sue for the use of his life mask in my makeups. And he let me know that he never gave his permission for that, which is totally wrong. Universal always paid when I played Stan Laurel and Charlie Chaplin and Groucho Marx. They paid for the licensing to use those characters' likenesses.
Right.
And I agreed with them. I said, it's not right that they didn't have an agreement for your. And this has, of course, come up again now with the advent of AI
Right.
and studios wanting to scan actors and use without any
Right.
rules or agreements.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting because Crispin, his attorney, very high-powered attorney, used my stories and my photos probably to help win his case. More than likely, Spielberg came up to me while we were shooting it at one point and said, "So, Crispin, I see you got your $1 million after all." I was like, "Oh my God, I'm saving him a bundle." Crispin ended up getting his settlement of like $765,000.
Wow.
Um, and the Screen Actors Guild started a rule saying a producer cannot use another actor's likeness without their permission.
Yeah.
And there's still a feud. Crispin's still bitter about it. Bob Gale is still bitter about it, and I'm still caught in the middle. And I'm not very much a fan of being in the middle.
No, I have compassion for you and feel for you, because that is you're just doing your job. You're working, and it's kind of I could see being a conflicted situation, but
It,
you
it
did
is
an incredible job and you showed up and they were able to make it, but not at your fault for any of that. I, it's a
for
shame.
for
Shame.
the actors watching. It's also a case where you can't go into something blind. You need to get as much information or ask your agent to get as much information as possible. Had I known that I was taking over the role, and Universal, very smart, called in the 11th hour on a Friday at 6 p.m. saying, we want him for George. And my agents were like, what? To start on Monday?
Right.
And they had to negotiate. They were going to offer me 10% more than the last big film I did on a weekly scale. And the money I got was really, you got Leah and Tom getting their $1 million and Michael J. Fox getting his $6 million and me getting a couple thousand a week. It wasn't so balanced. Or also, I was never given stunt pay.
Right.
Hanging upside down
That's
for,
done. Yeah.
let's see, one week I had a 19-hour day, a 21-hour day, and a 26-hour long day.
What?
Yes, in the same week. We only had Michael J. Fox on nights and weekends because during the day he was shooting the last season of Family Ties. I said, "Mike, when do you sleep?" He said, "In the limousine in between the studios." I was like, he's overworked.
Hmm.
Anyway, so it would say for a 9 a.m. call, if we were on a weekend, I'd have to be in the makeup chair by 4 a.m.
Wow.
Work for a couple hours and getting into makeup, take a half an hour for a breakfast burrito, get back in the chair to get painted in the wig, and so I could be ready to shoot at 8:30, 9 o'clock. And then we would shoot as long as people could stand, and then we'd have a forced call, which meant you had less than 8 hours before you're back in the makeup chair.
Right.
And
This is a good point to add in, though, for actors who aren't aware. They should know what their rights are and what the Screen Actors Guild is there to do to protect them.
my handlers from Industrial Light and Magic were phenomenal and very wonderful people. The whole crew were just fantastic. I loved being behind the scenes and watching this new technology, the Tondro Dolly working that VistaVision camera that Dean Cundy and Robert Zemeckis had kind of revolutionized on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where they could split the screen inside the camera so an actor could play with an animation.
Right.
And they took that and advanced on it with Back to the Future 2. And so Michael could play the 3 roles in that one scene where I'm hanging upside down in the kitchen for pizza. And the example, those were one of the 26-hour long days was shooting that scene because Michael had to go change into
Right.
the next character after we set the blocking for one character. He'd go change, which usually took 3 hours. And do that scene again and match perfectly for the camera, which was run by this computer. It was one of the first times a computer ran the camera and the dolly. Once we locked down the blocking, we could not veer for it. And of course, we had an earthquake one night during that
Oh
shoot.
my gosh, like you guys needed that.
Zemeckis thought we're going to have to start from scratch, but luckily they got around it.
Oh my goodness.
Anyway, so while I'm hanging upside down, I had to have crew members come up and say, all this hanging upside down torture was meant for Crispin. I was like, yeah, thanks.
That's a little bit more reassuring.
I really wish I could go back and get that stunt pay.
Yeah.
I have back problems still. Anyway, so it was a really tough place for me because I was actually denied my photos to promote myself and my work in that film for 6 months to a year.
While there was a lawsuit going on? Is that what?
Yeah, well, no, there was no lawsuit yet.
Oh.
I was going to do a promotional tour for Universal Orlando, the new theme park opening then, as Groucho and Charlie Chaplin, and also promote my work as George McFly in Back to the Future Part 2 coming out. And the Tin City Mall tour all of a sudden had the plug pulled on it. It was like, what the heck just happened? I didn't know that I was to be kept a secret so Crispin wouldn't sue.
Gotcha.
And it was, of course, when Part 3 came out that Crispin finally returned my phone calls and said, it's not fair what they did to me. And I said, what did they do to you, Crispin? And he said, well, Bob Gale made me cry in front of the extras, and they did this and that, and they used this footage without paying me more than scale. And I was like, it doesn't sound fair.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was kept secret, and I wasn't necessarily able to promote my career. And then when it came out that I helped Crispin and his attorney during his case, I found that I was blacklisted.
Blacklisted.
Angela Lansbury had worked with Laurel and Hardy in her youth on stage, and she wanted them to be on an episode of Diagnosis Murder. And it came to my boss at Universal and said, she loved seeing myself and my Oliver Hardy partner when we'd go down to the commissary and have lunch, Universal Lower Lot, and she requested us. But my boss said, what did you do wrong on Murder, She Wrote? I was like, I never worked on Murder, She Wrote. Well, I got a request from casting there. They want a Laurel and Hardy, but not Jeffrey Weissman. I was like, oh shit, I've been blacklisted. So my life kind of took a tailspin. Once again, like losing war games, things fell apart for me pretty badly. And it was actually quite a few years later that I was recognized for the Back to the Future work. I ended up being discovered by the DeLorean Owners Association. They started bringing me to their conventions as an actor from the films. And then slowly but surely, they'd start bringing in Chris Lloyd or Claudia Wells or even Bob Gale. And but that was kind of cool because then in 2008, we did the first Back to the Future cast reunion, which I was honored to be a part of, where we had 24 of the casting crew at the Hollywood show. And since then, every so often, I get to be a part of a cast reunion, and sometimes I do fan cons on my own. And in Sacramento, Intergalactic Expo and various Wizard Worlds and
that's amazing.
Fanboy Expos. We'll see if they bring me in. But nonetheless, the fans have been incredible. Worldwide, I get nice attention, not always the bad attention.
Good. And where can we find you working now? What's some projects that you might have coming up?
I have a film that's in post where I play a very, very badly behaved patriarch in a Black comedy called Siblings. I'm the patriarch of very badly behaved children, grown children, and it's hilarious. That will be hopefully getting a release. Probably do festivals for a little bit. Look for Siblings. I've got my long hair right now because I'm working as Mark Twain.
Oh yeah, I can see that.
I was kind of forced financially out of the Bay Area. I got uh, evicted from my farm up in Petaluma, and I now live up in the Sierra foothills. And so I've become certified as a docent at Columbia State Historic Park, and I lead tours as Mark Twain.
Oh, beautiful.
And just a week ago, there was a Back to the Future Part 3 themed event that was a fundraiser for Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research that I played Mark Twain for part of it. And
Oh,
fans, about 100 fans came from around the world to be this wonderful event, immersive, once again, event. And then I'm working on a fan film. A gentleman named Rolf Moore is a lead animator, graphic artist for Disney, who is a huge Back to the Future and American Graffiti fan. He's done a mashup of various films. Men in Black is in there, and Close Encounters. And I'm playing a comic artist who stumbles on a very strange alien invention in his DeLorean.
that sounds fascinating. What's
It
that
is
called?
fascinating. It's called Back to Graffiti,
Ah,
and I've shot now 4 days on it, and I'm keeping my hair long for that for the consistency of that character, and that's got probably another 3 or 4 days to shoot on that. So look for Back to Graffiti. He'll probably do festivals and fan cons and such with that, but he's going to use that as a calling card so he can direct and produce other projects, which is very smart.
as these projects come out, please share it with us. We'll put it on our social channels, and I'll even update the description in this link so people can come back and find that information of where they can see it and when it's released. That
Yeah, share my socials too.
Yes, please. And then what about also you're an amazing acting coach. I have been following you for years. Tell us where people can find you.
You've been following me since the San Francisco School of Digital Filmmaking way back. I
Yeah.
had created there for Jeremiah and Stephen. I created a actors, writers, and directors intensive workshop where every week we would rehearse one spot to shoot the following week, shoot one spot while one's rehearsing and one's casting, etc. And it was a real grind. It was like a repertory company for film.
I love that idea.
And it was a very popular class, and I plan to bring that back somehow when I get back, hopefully, to the Bay Area. But in the meantime, and I was on staff at the San Francisco Acting Academy and the Bay Area Professional Actors Studio, and those are on hold while I'm figuring out how to get back there. But I'm teaching virtually. I have a handful of students I teach virtually, and a few in person. There's even some young talent. I've mentored young talent for many years. One local gal in Sacramento, Claire Elizabeth, when she was 9, I started mentoring her. And
Oh,
about a year later, she was making her own little science fiction film. By the time she was 17, she was in Hollywood working. And then she branched out into makeup, and then now is a slam poet and teaches at conventions for homeschoolers.
that's awesome.
Yeah, the key I see for actors that gain success is being aggressive but not abusive in your aggression, being businesslike, keeping organized business contacts, keeping a journal for your creative and keeping a journal for your business, and assertive and proactive,
I love
and finding your way. Everyone's
I
going to have
love
a
all
different
of that, because to me you can't just all be artistic. You have to keep the business mind there until you have the proper reps on
and
your.
you can't wait for it to come to you. You
Yes.
can't wait for the agents. You have to always keep everything updated. I'm guilty of that, not having current resumes and photos all the time. It's a constant turnover money. Where's that money coming from? It's a difficult road. In fact, when new actors, new talent come to me and say, I want to be an actor, tell me what to do. I said, don't, the advice that I got from Don Adams when I was a kid, I said, forget about it. He said, it's 10% talent, 90% pure luck. But you can make your 20-year overnight success, cut it in half or even less by being proactive and have good business smarts and stay in touch with casting directors. Casting directors want to know what you're doing. and they're rooting for you.
100%. Thank you for saying that. People think that we're, on a high horse somewhere, but no, we are always vying for the people we put in front of our clients. We want them to do well. And we remember you if you have an outstanding performance and audition, but didn't get chosen by the producers or directors or for whatever reason. So
Yes.
work begets work, but auditions begets work, even if you didn't get the one you auditioned for. We remember. And so
Yes,
I
and
always tell people, go win the room or the Zoom call with the casting company, because we remember those people that are impressive and are going places, and 100% we're rooting for them.
then make yourself available for table reads and developments and
Yes.
stay in
Yes.
touch, but don't be abusive. Don't
Don't.
once or twice every 6 months or a year.
Yeah, I thank you for that too. Well, Jeffrey Weissman, it has been a pleasure. I mean, you have so much to share. It's so hard to pack this all in within an hour, but we did it, close to it. And I'm fascinated by you. I'm impressed by you. And anybody who has any desire to pick his brain and work with him, please reach out. Do yourself a favor, get the proper training, understand what your skill sets are, what your strengths are, and learn from the pros like Jeffrey Weissman, sorry. And again, I just can't thank you enough. Oh, there you are, as Charlie. Oh my
Yes,
gosh,
the
that's amazing.
the show that I'm doing right now in San Jose, I'm playing Charlie Chaplin for the Unhinged housewarming at the Winchester Mystery House. I had to show that. Thank you
That's
so much
amazing.
for having me on your show, Sally.
Oh, you are a gem, and God bless you for everything you've gone through. I know, I was just talking to somebody before we got here today, and we were talking about, listen, you don't get this far in this business without a few bruises, cuts, and wounds. You just got to keep fighting and um, and know that this is a tough business. But if you're doing what you love and you're following your dream, you're gonna grow from it, and you're gonna have a legacy. And my friend, you definitely do. So thank you for your sharing your craft with the world and taking time out to share it with those watching today.
I couldn't have said it better. Thank you, Sally.
All right, bye y'all.
Bye-bye. I'll see you in the future.
And that is it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening to The Casting Curtain. Please like, subscribe, follow, share, and basically tell the world about us. Go out there and break a leg and follow your dreams.